Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some poetry that has interested me as of late. And today's poem is all about oppressive police officers and tea. I am referring to the Tea and Sage poem by Fady Joudah. First, I just want to highlight how this poem, or this video, is coming out on Thanksgiving, a day often associated with the Plymouth colony and how indigenous Americans and pilgrims came together to celebrate food and have community together. A myth that fails to highlight what was going on in the colony at the time, as well as how the colony treated the natives, and even further ignored how they were treated for centuries afterwards. And I bring all of that up because Fady Joudah is a Palestinian poet, and we are in the midst of the Palestinian genocide, which is taking place in the Gaza Strip, where an indigenous population has been told for decades that they do not belong in the place where they have lived for generations, and as a result they are dying, they are being bombed to death, they are being forcibly relocated, becoming refugees in their own land. A lot of similarities between indigenous Americans and Palestinians. So I feel it's a very notable thing to talk about, especially on Thanksgiving. For those who don't know, Fady Joudah is a Palestinian American writer and also a doctor. He's been writing for the past 15 or so years, and also has served as a translator on a number of works, which is always cool. He's recently spoken out about the Palestinian genocide and the violence done toward the Palestinian people, which you can find online in the various videos and whatnot in which he's been quoted. And in his work, he frequently talks about the colonialist oppression that the Palestinian people have faced, and he also does in ways that are not quite so direct at times, often shifting topics mid-poem, which makes it hard to follow, but still very interesting. So without further ado, let's talk about the Tea and Sage poem. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. The Tea and Sage poem. At a desk made of glass in a glass-walled room with red airport carpet, an officer asked my father for fingerprints, and my father refused. So another offered him tea, and he sipped it, the teacup template for fingerprints. My father says it was just hot water with a bag. My father says in his country, because the earth knows the scent of history, it gave the people sage. I like my tea with sage, from my mother's garden next to the snapdragons. She calls fish mouths coming out for air. A remedy for stomach pain she keeps in the kitchen where she always sings. First, she is Hagar boiling water where tea is loosened. Then she drops in a pinch of sage and lets it sit a while. She tells a story. The groom arrives late to his wedding, wearing only one shoe. The bride asks him about the shoe. He tells her he lost it while jumping over a house wall. Breaking away from soldiers, she asks, tea with sage or tea with mint? With sage, he says. Sweet scent, bitter tongue. She makes it, he drinks. So that was the Tea and Sage poem. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit worth talking about in this poem. In terms of narrative, as I mentioned before, Fady Joudah isn't really direct in his poem, so sometimes it can be hard to follow a narrative if there even is one. What seems to be going on is that an officer is asking the father for fingerprints, presumably because Fady Joudah is Palestinian. This officer is maybe a member of the IDF or a Jewish police officer, or an Israeli police officer, my bad. And the father refuses, and so they just use the fingerprints on the cup. And then when they're drinking tea with the mother or his wife kind of recalls another story about a bride and a groom. The groom is late because, again, another incident with soldiers, presumably the IDF, and to help the husband, deal with things, she just asks, what kind of tea, and she provides the tea, and the groom drinks, and it's presumably a warm feeling right there. So you see quite a bit in this poem. Kind of one of the first things I noticed is, of course, the story within a story. So you have the narrator telling the story about their father, and then within this story is the mother telling the story of the bride and groom. So a kind of a framing device there to tell the same kind of story, which is the relationship of this culture with tea. Presumably, the Palestinians love their tea, which might be a little bit of colonialist because they were settled at one time by the British. But you see how the kind of cultures share in exchange right there. But you see the feeling that tea brings individuals. Like, in order to calm down the father, the officer brings tea, and the father notes it's just hot water with a bag, which I'll get at in a few moments. But that's an effort to calm him down, and then to further calm down and sort of help them forget the worries of what happened with the officer, his wife makes tea. And then she relays a story, which is the focus of tea. Like, the bride asks him about the shoe. He tells her he lost it while jumping over a house wall, breaking away from soldiers. She asks, tea with sage or tea with mint? Kind of an acknowledgement that what he had gone through was pretty harsh, but in order to ease his mind and whatnot, she's providing him with tea. And he says, sweet scent, bitter tongue, she makes it, he drinks. Very simple, but getting at the fact that tea is very important for these individuals. So you kind of learn a lot about these people through the use of this simple beverage. But what's also interesting is how the colonialist oppressor, the officer in this story, uses tea against the father. Like, he says, so he offered him tea and he sipped it, the teacup template for fingerprints, an effort to get fingerprints in order to maybe implicate the father down the road, or just to have the fingerprints for later cases, essentially furthering the surveillance state that is the Gaza Strip. But what's interesting is that the father says it was just hot water with a bag, indicating that the officers, the IDF, maybe in this story, know what is important to these people, but they can't duplicate the same result. They can try to in order to get in good with these people, but ultimately they never will, because theirs isn't made with the love that we see in these stories. So kind of an instance of the colonialist oppressor, not really catching on to what's valuable in this culture, only being able to duplicate it a little bit. Anyway, so that is the Tea and Sage poem by Fady Joudah. Pretty high quality poem. I definitely recommend that you read it, and I will put a link to it in the description. I think Fady Joudah's other poems are of sort of a similar kind of vein, often talking about his mother and father and the kind of loss that they experienced, losing their childhood home in Gaza and Palestine because of colonialist oppression and whatnot. It's sort of like interesting themes that he's exploring in his poetry, and I recommend that you check him out. But yeah, otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this poem or this poet if they don't already know. Also, join the Discord if you want to have further conversations about this type of poetry or other books or such. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and tea-drinking travels. Farewell.